All right, guys, you asked and we answered. We went out and asked Slowly Sipping Coffee if they'd join us on the show today. This is probably one of the best blogs that you haven't heard of, and we're super excited that Jay is joining us in the studio today to unpack the story of Slowly Sipping Coffee. Welcome to the show, guys.
You're listening to Choose FI Radio. The blueprint for financial independence lives here. If you're looking to unlock the secrets to financial independence and early retirement, you're in the right place. Stay tuned and join a community of like-minded people who are getting off the hamster wheel and taking control of their lives in the pursuit of financial independence. Choose FI, your home for financial independence online.
All right, Brad, we're back in the studio today. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing real well. Yeah, this should be a really good episode. We had a ton of people mention that they wanted us to interview Jay from Slowly Sipping Coffee, and yeah, we got him on. This should be a good one. I've read through a bunch of his blog, and it's just really interesting writing. So should be a good conversation for sure.
You know, one of the things is you don't know about someone until you do. And I had never heard of Slowly Sipping Coffee. And then we had 3 of our guests who are prolific writers saying, we love these guys. And I went and checked it out, and it doesn't surprise me why. Fantastic writing style, fantastic story, and definitely someone that their message resonates with me. So I'm excited that we can do this today as well. How you doing, Jay?
I'm doing great, thanks.
We're excited to get a chance to go through the Slowly Sipping Coffee story. You're a personal finance blog, not a barista blog. Where does that name come from?
Well, it's pretty funny. Thanks. First of all, thanks for having me on. But yeah, we actually came up with the name of our blog while we were sitting around at a Starbucks. We were sitting there thinking about a blog, and well, if we want to track our early retirement journey, or pre-retirement as we were calling it back then, what should we do? And we realized, well, it was our Friday off, because we have every other Friday off, or at least I still do. We were sitting there having like our morning kind of coffee dates, and we were realizing that, hey, our life has gotten super busy, crazy with both of us in these jobs. And we really want to just get into more of being able to have time and freedom to sit around and just slowly sip coffee like we were doing on that Friday morning, as opposed to grab a coffee and head out the door to get to work and being at work and having to have coffee there. So that was pretty much it. The vision of what we wanted our life to be once we hit FI is to be able just to sit around and slowly sip coffee.
That does sound perfect. And I am the one that's probably the most guilty of guzzling it, but I think I even wrote an article up on this last year. Like, doing coffee and doing it right is one of my serious passions in this world. And Brad can confirm that for you. I get a huge kick out of making the absolute perfect cup of coffee.
Yeah, but I've actually read that article. It was pretty interesting. So it's funny because I stumbled across roasting my own coffee, which, again, with the coffee name in the blog or whatnot, you would think I'd be super meticulous with coffee. But yeah, I do like roasting my own. So I got a lot of what you were talking about there. So it resonated with me.
Nice. Well, thanks for the feedback.
So Jay, you and your wife were sitting in Starbucks talking about a blog, but I'm assuming your journey to FI, or whatever it is you may call it, and we're going to talk about that later, but I'm sure that started years before. Give us the origin story of your life and your FI journey.
It started probably about 5 years before that, maybe. Mrs. SSC had a rough patch at work and was just not being fulfilled in her job, not getting any satisfaction out of it. And when she started Googling early retirement, FI, how can I get out of the rat race sooner, she stumbled across a couple of blogs, with Mr. Money Mustache being the most influential one for her. And being a pretty heavy numbers person and already having a retirement spreadsheet put together before she knew about any of all of this stuff, she just started crunching numbers and seeing what it would take for us to be able to retire early. Ironically, her pre-retirement spreadsheet, before she found out about early retirement, already had us able to walk away at 45 if we wanted to, and which I didn't believe it then, and would tell people that as well, because it took a while for me to get on board with it. But after about 3 months of reading those blogs, she started sending me some stuff, and my initial reaction was, hey, no way, I've already lived off $25K a year. I'm not quitting this job right now just to go do that so I don't have to work. It's not that bad for me. So it took a while for her to get me on board with it. But yeah, it was a similar situation how I got on board. probably about 3 or 4 years after that, maybe, I had also gone through a rough patch at work and had been going through her spreadsheet, and she was still projecting living off of, say, 50K a year. And I didn't see how it was possible. And then she sent me our whole last year's spending, and I was able to see we really have lived off of that. It's like if you take out the daycare, you take out the mortgage because we're buying the house and all of the extraneous stuff. Yeah, it didn't seem like we were cramped. It didn't seem like we were stingy or super budgeting. And I was like, holy heck, what can we do to speed this up? Is there anything we can do? And that's when I got on board with it.
Two things really strike me. One, I love that Miss SSC is the powerhouse behind you guys. That's amazing. I don't have a lot to add to that, but it's definitely inspiring. I also love that you guys are Excel sheet nerds. Brad and I did this episode very recently called The Pillars of Phi, and we probably should have included being an Excel sheet nerd as a pillar of Phi. We love spreadsheets. They are probably one of the sexier things in the Phi community. I love looking at numbers. I love that Phi is a function of the math, and Excel proves it. So do you guys share your Excel sheets or any of the templates that you use with people on your website?
Yes, actually. We do have the one that we use as a template. I think it was in a December post from 2 years ago. So maybe a 2015 December post. We've got, I think it's titled something along the lines of Our Christmas Gift to You, our Excel spreadsheet. And we actually had some links to some other bloggers that had their Excel spreadsheets as well, as kind of commingling of other bloggers we knew with Excel spreadsheets. So we do have that online where you can find it. Yep.
Yeah, that's great. And we'll definitely link to that in the show notes for sure, so everybody can check that out. And just real quick, so going back to when your wife found this originally, was she keeping an Excel spreadsheet before she found Mr. Money Mustache and the other blogs, or was that really the aha moment for her?
Oh, God, no. No, she had a spreadsheet way before probably I even came into the picture, to be honest. So her financial background and financial savviness is years and light years above mine. So she had already gotten her spreadsheet, and basically she'd started updating it and adding stuff into it now that we both had really good oil income jobs and 401k matches and extra money. She was trying to figure out what to do with it beyond just stimulating the economy and the little bit of investing that we had been doing. And so at that point, her dad had just fully retired and had a Morningstar account. So she would go in there and research stuff, and our conversations would go along the lines of, I'm thinking about investing in blah stocks or blah funds or whatever, and here's the risks and here's the rewards. What do you think? And I'd just sort of look at her and say, yeah, sounds good to me. Just 100% trust on my end. So fortunately, she's not a crook or,
Well, she is kind of invested in the results, right? It needs to work for her too.
Yes, exactly. So
when you said a couple of minutes ago, Jay, that on her pre-Phi spreadsheets, she had you retiring at 45. So you're saying, like, in her original versions of the spreadsheets, before she found out anybody, before you supercharged any of your savings or did anything that you found on Phi blogs, she already knew you could retire early? Am I hearing that right?
Yes. I mean, I found it out accidentally because she was emailing it around to some of our coworkers at our company, and because they were wanting inputs on, hey, how should I set up my 401k? What should I invest in? What's good? And she's like, oh, I've got it in a spreadsheet I can send you. And so one of our friends that was sitting in the cubicle right next to mine opened it up and literally said, oh my God, you guys are retiring at 45? And I said, what? What are you talking about? She said, here on the spreadsheet, it shows you guys can retire at 45. And I said, yeah, no, that's just some black magic, voodoo wizardry. I wouldn't believe those numbers. But yeah, they were there saying, in theory, yeah, we would be able to retire around that time anyway.
I love that in the slowly sipping coffee household, the answer is no, it's on the spreadsheet, Jay. It's on the spreadsheet. It works. Trust me.
Yep. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Jay, one of the things that really resonated with me about the story that you guys are telling was your own perspective when she was sending you all these websites for these uber extreme minimalist and early retirement folks. And I would love to hear your particular take on how you are resistant to that and then where you decided to go with it as well.
Yeah, I mean, seriously, a lot of my initial knee-jerk reaction was that Chris Farley sketch on SNL where he's talking about the kids and doing drugs because you'll end up living in a van down by the river. And I mean, that's the image that popped into my head every time she's talking about living off 25 grand a year or similar kinds of numbers. And so, I mean, my perspective is I came from a pretty low income household, fairly poor, just, one income, 3 kids. And I was like, why in God's name do you want to go from very comfortable oil job salaries, very easy job, we both like what we do, and just walk away from that, in another 5 or 10 years or whatever it was going to be? Why would we want to scrape by and just make ends meet just so we don't have to work? Because it just didn't make sense to me. And it just brought back memories of when I was younger and having to worry about money, and money being such a huge stressor in, will we have money for groceries? Are the lights going to get turned off? Is the water going to get turned off? Are we going to get those turned back on? Like, those were the visions dancing in my head when she first brought up FI, and we can save X amount to live off X amount, but it might be a little tight. And it just did not seem to be a future I wanted any part of, to be honest.
Can you tell us about your light bulb moment?
The light bulb moment pretty much came within a series of emails back and forth between Mrs. SSC and myself. And I was at my new job. She was at her old job. And so we did a lot of correspondence with email, and it essentially just went back and forth of, she sent me the spreadsheet again, of which she does a lot. And I look over it and replied to her, yeah, I just don't see how this is going to work. I mean, you're saying 50 grand, but I just don't see it in the spreadsheet. And her reply, which it typically is, oh my God, what don't you see? And so it's another snippet of the spreadsheet with lots of stuff highlighted and marked out of, this column is what we spend now. This column is our FI budget that doesn't have daycare because the kids are older, doesn't have the mortgage, doesn't have all of the convenient stuff that we pay for now. And at the bottom of that is the number that it would take to live off of. And I don't know why I hadn't seen it. It's the same spreadsheet she'd been sending me for years, but for whatever reason, it just clicked at that point. And I was like, oh my God, how has it taken me almost 6 years before I've gotten on board with this or realized that, oh yeah, this is doable?
Because she hadn't started using the highlighter yet, man. That's the critical part. And not just one color of highlighter, you got to use multiples. And then it helps when you circle it as well, the key points.
Yes, big arrows pointing to it, kind of a smack in the forehead sort of look going along with it. So,
and
yeah,
right now
yes.
She's listening to this thinking, yes, finally, somebody gets it.
Yeah.
So Jay, it took your wife 6 years of trying to beat this into your brain for you to actually get it, right? 6 years. So she found the 5 blogs. She had been on this journey. And what goes on, and not to be stupid, but like, what goes on in the household? I'm assuming she does the finances. She obviously does the spreadsheet. Like, is it just, okay, we're going on our merry way and she's going pedal to the metal towards FI? And I don't even know how to ask the question, honestly, because it's, I'm just trying to understand like the mindset and the conversations within the household, I guess.
So the conversations at the beginning were fairly minimal because, again, it started with me with that initial spreadsheet. So I knew she's investing money in the background beyond our 401ks, and I was fine with that and pretty much trusted, yep, you're making the right choices. I'm pretty aggressive, so unless you're taking it to Vegas, anything short of that, I'm fine with. It's like, don't get that aggressive with it, but whatever else, sure. And not so much in bonds. Like, let's go more growth stuff. So we were both on the same page there. But beyond that, we didn't really, honestly, we really didn't discuss a lot. Kind of my only contribution towards it at the beginning was coming in with a mountain of debt. And so she started trying to get all of that debt, like 60 grand or so in school loans and about 15, 16, 18 grand or so of credit card debt. And she wanted that all paid off as soon as possible. So she was taking a lot of our money in the first year or two and just throwing it towards that. So at the very beginning, it's not like we started off with our full salaries just to run around and dance around in dollar bills kind of stuff. It was not fairly tight budget, but a little restrictive budget. And so once those got paid off, all of a sudden we freed up all of this cash to be able to invest. And she just started putting that towards investments. And the other big thing was our credit card bill. Like, we noticed it had been pretty high every month. And sure, it got paid off every time, but it was still higher than we wanted it to be. And so we just did a little money challenge of, hey, can we cut our credit card bill by 10% this month? I mean, that's kind of ridiculous, but sure, we shot for 10%. And with almost no effort, we got it almost 25%. And so then we decided, hey, what if we cut it by 50%? And we decided that the next month we hit 50% pretty easily. And it was seriously just by being more conscious of what we were spending stuff on and asking, do I want this or do I need this? And to put it into financial terms, that essentially freed up like $2,000 a month that we had just been pissing away and eating out go into Target because we're bored, go into other stores because we're bored, and not questioning anything that gets tossed into the cart. It's kind of nauseating thinking about it, how much we were just frittering away on nothing. And so for us, that freed up a whole nother 24 grand a year that we were able to start investing outside the 401ks. Those were more of the conversations that we had, not necessarily, oh, this is going to get us further down the road to FI, but more of, hey, what can we do to cut spending? And we have allowances. So it was, hey, what if our allowances cover, first it went to allowances covered pretty much anything that's specific to just me or just Mrs. SSC. So that, for instance, eating out. If I go out to eat for lunch or at work or anything, that would come from the allowance. If I went to go pick up some homebrew supplies, that would come from my allowance. Things like that. If I want to buy a video game, allowance. So first they were covering things like that. And then the scope started to widen to say work clothes, because Mrs. SSC was buying a lot of work clothes at the time and thought, oh, if this is coming from the regular budget, but you don't really buy a lot of work clothes, maybe we should put that in there too. And so it was more a lot of conversations related to just spending and day-to-day kind of spending, as opposed to a whole lot of conversations about investing and trying to hit this target goal of early retirement.
Yeah, that makes sense. So of that roughly $2,000 a month that you guys cut out, like how much of that, it sounds like both of you were in on this spending. So it wasn't just you or just Mrs. SSC. Can you give us some breakdown? Like how much of it was just errant items at Target or eating out, or, you know, like, do you have any kind of breakdown of how you cut out $24,000 a year in just random frivolous spending, essentially?
Eating out played a big part in it. I mean, I would say probably of that overall number, that going out to eat was at least 30-40% of that, I would say. And we still cooked at home a lot. We made a lot of meals at home, but it was easy just to go out and grab appetizers on the weekend, or grab drinks, or go out with friends and grab something to eat if we didn't feel like cooking at night. That was a big part of it. The other one we realized was moving from Chicago and Denver, respectively, down to Louisiana. We got brutal heat wave of a Gulf Coast summer, and we realized that it's kind of like the opposite, where down there you can't go outside for about 3 months, 4 months of the year, but it's just in the summer. So our default became to go to Target and wander around if we were bored, or to go to World Markets or places like that. And yeah, we would just not really question if we threw random stuff into the cart. And when you do that once or twice a week and spend a couple of $100 a week, yeah, it adds up quickly. Costco, oh my God, that was another one that it's super. We couldn't go into that store and walk out with under a $300 bill almost every time. And it would just be random stuff, nothing specific, sometimes lawn stuff, sometimes food stuff. But yeah, that was another huge one.
That's awesome. And it hits me where I live, dude. You know, I think that Costco is an amazing way to save money. But wow, you know, if you go into it with the wrong perspective, you can just be throwing $100 bills out the window. It's like Christmas every day, all day. You're always finding something new. And so there's definitely a fine line there between capturing the discounts, the real savings that they offer, and not hemorrhaging unnecessary dollars.
Oh, I totally agree. It can be a very great place to shop and a very great way to save money, but you definitely have to be strategic about it, have a list when you go in, and not just be like, oh, shiny, let's put it in the cart. So yeah.
One of the real dangers that I think that I fall into, and I think that you fall into, and I know you've talked about, is this idea of lifestyle creep. So you've bought into the idea of financial independence. You've bought into the idea of capturing this 50% savings rate and just destroying your recurring expenses. And now you're in a place where you have all this discretionary money, but you haven't actually made the choice to assign those numbers to a place, like assign it to VTSAX or some sort of investment fund. And so you just have it hanging out longer. And then over time you say, oh, well, I deserve it. We've already made all these really big moves. And this discretionary spending ends up getting captured at these fun things that you do, that now you have more discretionary spending, but because you haven't assigned it to an investment, to your future, it's just getting sucked up in the now.
Yes. So I mean, I totally agree, because going back to the type of conversations around our household, they centered on, like you said, cutting out our current spending, trying to get it down to reasonable levels. And then while I wasn't actively saying, let's put this in VTSAX or anything like that, fortunately in the background, Mrs. SSC wasn't letting those piles of money just sit around every month and get 1 or 2% interest in the savings at the bank. And
dude, she is like a superhero. I mean, you're just documenting her awesomeness.
Oh, no, I swear. It's like I joke about that she's the best financial decision decision I've ever made in my life. But good Lord, if anybody has her as a CFO, I mean, she's essentially the CFO of our household. And yeah, there couldn't be a better one to run it. So
You guys have this really cool concept that you talk about, and you wrote an article, which we'll link to in the show notes, called Goodbye Fire, Hello FFLC. So fully funded lifestyle change. I'd love to hear you talk about that, maybe in context.
Yeah, that whole fully funded lifestyle change, again, ties back into the Slowly Sipping Coffee blog name, in the sense that maybe a year or 6 months into the writing for the blog, we realized, yeah, we're both kind of too busy, and she's definitely more type A. I'm more of I could be fine with retirement and finding something to keep myself busy, but we realized we don't necessarily want to quit work just for the sake of quitting work, but we just want a lifestyle change, because the life that we created for ourselves is just way too hectic and not sustainable. And one of the things that we realized was easy for us to be able to get into this lifestyle change and look at it like that versus retirement is that, unlike a lot of our coworkers who have 2 oil salaries coming in, we hadn't gotten trapped by lifestyle creep to where we have $60,000 cars that aren't paid off. Well, we still don't have $60,000 cars, but we don't have those recurring bills every month, and we don't have all of these just trappings that typically come along with that those sorts of incomes. I mean, we didn't have a pool at our house. We don't have the latest, greatest smartphones or the most super high mega data plan or any of that kind of stuff. I mean, yeah, we get along and we exist and have a great life, and it's really comfortable. But just by, again, being conscious with our spending and reeling that stuff in, we are able to realize that, hey, we really don't need a whole lot of money to live off every year. So it's like being able to avoid that lifestyle creep that comes along with 2 oil salaries or any salary. I mean, good grief, I had lifestyle creep when I went from making 30 grand a year to 50 grand a year. I wasn't any richer by any means, because I just spent it the more it came in. And it's so easy to see that happening that we realized, well, we don't have that. We're comfortable. We like what we have. We just want a lifestyle change where we can get a lot more freedom and we can have a lot more time to spend with the kids. And so that's what we started looking into. And then coincidentally, oil industry took a downturn, and all of a sudden both of us were looking at layoffs. And talk about changing your perspective. I mean, there for a while it was the moderately funded lifestyle change as opposed to a fully funded, because it's like, well, on the one hand, if we both get laid off, I was I wouldn't have been sad about it, because it'd be a kick in the butt to be like, all right, well, let's start this. It's not going to be at the level we wanted, but I know we'll make it work because we're both pretty smart people and we can figure something out. But I was kind of on the fence as if we had both gotten laid off or not. But fortunately, that didn't happen and we didn't have to go down that road. But it did kick the lifestyle change mentality into overdrive, because we realized, one, we're fine living in a smaller, efficient, practical house versus the monstrosity that we landed in Houston. 2, we'd much rather have a lot more freedom and time to get to spend with our kids and with each other, as opposed to working 10, 11-hour days. Once you add in the commute, having the kids in daycare or school the whole time, or having them with some kind of a nanny afterwards, because again, we'd be working the longer days. So yeah, that was what we started shooting for, as opposed to, say, air quote, early retirement.
Yeah, I love that. I wonder if Choose FFLC is available as a domain name. I don't think it has quite the same ring as Choose FI, but the FFLC really resonates with me. And I think FI is kind of an umbrella term that contains financial independence. It contains FFLC. It contains ER. And I love that you can choose what it looks like, but FFLC is very empowering. It kind of takes the pressure off. You don't have to have a perfect number. A lot of people get really fussed about, is it 4% or is it 3%? Is the money going to run out if I never work another day and I'm only relying on just my withdrawals? But FFLC, I think, does kind of change the metric, and it talks more about, wow, because of the choice that you made, because you decided to fully fund this lifestyle change, if Miss SSC were to get laid off, how crazy and awesome is it that only in this FI community that we're in are you suddenly like, wow, this might be an opportunity where we actually get to pull the trigger on this thing and actually try it, as opposed to, your world is over. It's the end of all.
I can attest that of all the people that were going through the layoffs, we were probably the 2 least stressed about it. Because, yeah, I mean, like you said, we'd set up our lifestyle to where it's like, if we lost her income, we'll still be fine on my income. And I know couples that were just sweating it because they didn't get the bonus so 1 year, so they had to come up with some other way to pay property taxes because they don't have an emergency fund because they just spend everything as soon as it comes in. And a lot of those kinds of couples, yeah, they were super stressed because everything cost a lot of money, and their lifestyle that they'd created is just, it needs both of those incomes. And so fortunately, ours was not necessarily in that point. And our backup plan was, well, we'll pull the ripcord, put the house up for sale, and start looking for a job. And even if it's only a $30,000, $40,000 a year job, we've got years of data on a spreadsheet that says, hey, we can make that work, especially if it's in a cheaper cost of living area. And yeah, it was really empowering, and still is, to know that, well, if everything just goes to crap tomorrow, and if jobs get lost or things happen, it's not the end of the world for us. Yes, it would suck. Yes, it would create some hard times, but it is a really nice feeling to know that, hey, we're going to come out on top and we'll be good. And we've got multiple plans to choose from and enact if something like that came down.
Hey, Jay, so while we're on the topic of talking about other friends and family in the oil industry, and you're talking about these potential layoffs, I want to actually go back to something you mentioned about, maybe 15 minutes ago, where your wife sent the spreadsheet to your coworkers and friends. And from the sound of it, that had your real numbers in it, or at least an approximation of it, because they said, oh, you can retire at 45. So I guess my larger question is, have you spoken about FI to your family and friends, and what do they think about it? Have you been able to convert anybody? Is that even a goal? Do people know about the website? I'm just endlessly curious about how it's impacted your real life and your real life relationships.
I haven't necessarily tried to convert anybody, but Mrs. SSC's family knows about our plan and is fairly intimate with our plan. And at least for the first couple of years, they were a bit more harsh on it than I was, especially her dad, because he had recently just retired, and he just couldn't. It's from the old school mentality of, no, you retire closer to 60, 65, not necessarily anything before 50. And in your early 40s, no, you guys aren't accounting for everything. But I have to say, after seeing, again, the spreadsheet and our investments,
no one can resist the spreadsheet.
I know. And especially he's an engineer. And so he even more so relates to spreadsheets. But, it's something that we openly discuss with those guys. And even our most recent foray into purchasing a plot of land out by Hill Country, they came up to visit us, and they are even on board with that. And they've gotten really supportive once it's like they see the numbers and they realize how little we do live off of every year. And yeah, it's hard to argue about the numbers. So he's gone from being staunchly against it to really for it, especially with us getting to have more time with the kids, because he worked a whole lot, 50-hour weeks or that sort of thing, and just wasn't around as much as he wanted to be with his kids for his job. So yeah, he sees that aspect of it as being a real huge plus. As far as coworkers and other friends or colleagues, some of our close friends know about our plans in a very vague sense that, yeah, we're probably going to check out in 3 to 5 years, but we don't necessarily say, oh yeah, we're hoping for 2 years, kind of a thing.
It definitely does help to soften it around the edges. I can understand the reluctance to just say, yeah, I could be done in 6 months, or I could be done in a year.
Yes, exactly. Because it can come off bragging sounding very easily, and it's not meant to be like that at all. One of the things is I mentor some people at work, and I talk to a lot of the newer hires that are early 20s, mid 20s. And the one thing I do is just try to keep impressing upon them, like, save as much as you can now. Keep your lifestyle costs down, keep that kind of spending down, and put it into other investments. Because, I bring up with them, in 15 years, you love your job now, but in 15 years, maybe you're going to get burnt out on it. And maybe you'd rather go work at animal shelter because you're really passionate about that. Or maybe you'd rather go work at any other thing that you get more satisfaction out of. And if you can start saving and putting stuff aside now, you can create that freedom for yourself to get to go do something like that.
I am passionate about what you just said. And because of that, I want to hop in. What is so powerful about that is you may be the only voice in that person's life that's saying anything close to that at all. Every other influence you have says you need to get this this middle class lifestyle, which has the nice house and it has the newer car, and you deserve it.
Yes, yeah. I mean, again, especially coming from that same mentality of this is all the stuff I couldn't have when I was a kid. And I see that a lot with these guys, and I just try to remind them, at some point you're going to want to do something else besides work in this job, and at some point you might want to live outside of Houston or another oil town, and you've got the freedom, you've got the opportunity to set up your life however you want it to turn out, but you have to start thinking about it now, because otherwise in 10 years you're going to wake up and be like, oh my gosh, how can I get out of this? And you'll be 10 years behind. So
Jay, do you think any of your mentees have actually taken that to heart and have started on any kind of FI path? Like, have you introduced them by any chance to like a Mr. Money Mustache or any of these websites, or is it just you talking about it generally?
No, actually, it's pretty funny. I've sent out lists and links to all kinds of different. Usually it starts with trying to introduce them to what is an index fund or what is a mutual fund, because most of the time I get these shocked, horrified looks that no, finance is way above my head. And my take is, hey, if I can figure it out, anybody can figure it out, because I am not fiscally minded at all. And it's actually way easier than you would think. And so I've got lists, a Word document essentially with a bunch of links to, yes, different sites. Like, I wouldn't say Mr. Money Mustache is one that I send out because he's so extreme. I don't want it to have the effect it did on me and scare him off. But like one of my favorite articles that I email out is one that Paula Pant wrote called I Don't Know How to Invest and I'm Afraid of Making Expensive Mistakes. And essentially she goes through this whole article and explains this is what a 401k is, but she puts it in terms of like, think of it as a teacup or a coffee cup. That's one of the articles that I send out a lot, how to create just a simple 3-fund couch potato. I was showing one of my mentees, here's Share Builder. And this one you can put $100 every 2 weeks from every paycheck automatically in there. And then you can take that and you can buy the same sorts of index funds or mutual funds or ETFs from this account, but you don't have to have a minimum. If you can only afford a quarter of a share, you can buy a quarter of a share. If you can only afford 10 shares at a time, you can do that and you don't have to save up a huge chunk. So it's like also trying to go down those paths of there are other ways to live life besides this work until you're 60 and then retire kind of mentality.
Jay, for people getting started on the FI path who are out there in the audience listening, that document sounds fantastic. Do you have that as a giveaway on your site? And if not, do you think you could share it with us so that we could include it in the show notes to this episode?
Sure. Yeah, I can. I'll find that and send that over to you guys in an email.
Okay, wonderful. So everybody listening to this, we'll have it. If you head to the show notes for this episode at choosefi.com, we'll have this as a download. It sounds like a really valuable document.
And in general, guys, if you guys have, just to our audience, if y'all have trouble getting, like if you want to get the show notes in your email as soon as it's released, just in general, you can subscribe to our email list. Just text ChooseFI, that's one word, to 44222. And then as soon as this episode, or future episodes are released, if you are on that list, you'll get an email prompt just letting you know, and then you'll get access to all these different tools. So Jay, one of the things that really strikes me, and I thought y'all did a wonderful job of laying out, is you build this FI plan, and then depending on your determined risk tolerance, you come up with a strategy that may adjust based on what your actual results are. Did I say that close to correctly? And could you maybe guide us through your thought process or through Miss SSC's thought process on how to balance risk to a FI plan?
Sure. It was funny when you were talking about is it 3% or 4% or that sort of thing, because just last week I had the same conversation with her, regarding risk and regarding that. And I realized, oh God, I'm more driven by, hey, how do our numbers compare to a 4% rule? And is it 3%? Is it 3.5%? Something along those lines. And she approaches it strictly from numbers, because I said, have you ever run that? Do you know what we're sitting at yearly? And she's like, no, why do I care? It's just a number. It could change. Some years we might be 7%. Some years it might be 2%. But I've got it all built in there and it all works out regardless of what it is. And I had made her go in and add another column so I could see, because I realized my risk tolerance is more pinned, say, around a 4% rule. And for me, it was really comforting seeing that, oh yeah, for 85, 90% of the years, we're at 3.5% withdrawal rates. However, she doesn't really give a flip about it because she just looks at the numbers and wants to make sure it all works out well in the end. And so like from a risk, looking at our risks, the biggest thing that changed kind of our numbers is initially Mrs. SSC loves running C-Fire Sim and Fire Calc and seeing those projections. And granted, they're all historical. It doesn't show anything forward or whatnot. But for her, it gives her a nice, comfortable, warm fuzzy to see that we're hitting, let's say, 100% or 98%. And one of the big drivers of getting our number changed and our years moved up was me stumbling across Mr. Money Mustache forum talking about 80% is probably just as probable as 90%. And they were just discussing back and forth of who cares if it's 80 versus 90 or 85 versus 90, or why target 90% success rates, because that 10% could happen and it could still be a failure, and it was more driven of the first 5 to 10 years. What you do with your money has more to do with it than whatever C-Fire Sim spits out as a success rate. And so when we started loosening the limits and the upper limits and lower limits and looking at it as more of, okay, we probably won't need less than, let's say, 35 a year, and we don't want to go above pulling out, let's say, 70 grand a year. And you start putting those caps on it and loosening things up in those regards. Yeah, it's like all of a sudden, even though we're air quote more risky, or we have, say, an 85% chance of success, or 85 to 90 versus Mrs. SSC feeling more comfortable with a 95 to 100. We don't really care if those move down or where they land in that sense. And so, yeah, I think it's just a lot of it being looking at this stuff and dealing with this stuff so much, and kind of talking about it more around the household and what our plans are of, if I quit this job and we move out to, say, Canyon Lake, I'm not going to get the same type of job, but I'll probably find some kind of job. And, it's like, well, even if I can find something that just pulls in $400 a month, that covers allowances, which is a huge chunk of our budget. That'd be like 15% of our yearly budget if I could just find an odd job that did something like that. So taking that into account really lowered our fear of this whole plan failing, really. And it's like, maybe that increased our risk with it, and that's, okay, we're not working 2 or 3 more years just so we can have an extra 100,000 or so on top of our pile, because in the long run, that could disappear with like one cancer scare or with one drop in the stock market, or like the return on that. We started looking at that, and it's like, it just doesn't make sense once we hit a certain point to keep working just to add to it.
I love that. Brad and I are putting ourselves in a position where we get a lot of enthusiasm, we get a lot of great feedback, but we also get a lot of fear. People that are worried about that 1%, that 5%, that 10% chance that it doesn't work. And, Miss SSC has moved you guys to a totally different framework where you have a 90% chance of success. Plus, and if it doesn't work, you guys have got a strategy to balance that out. And so is that 5% chance? Is that 10% chance? Is that 1% chance keeping you in the workforce for an extra 10 years? That sounds like a pretty poor trade-off. And frankly, Jay, we love talking to you. But Brad, is it just me, or does Miss SSC sound like the coolest person in the world? I'm thinking she should be on the Mount Rushmore of fire.
Yeah, I think we should add her. She sounds amazing. I really want to, hopefully we can get you guys back on at some point and get her on the podcast as well.
No, I think that would be great, because she drove home that exact point to me 3 weeks ago when we were discussing the home building and, size of it and all of that. And I said, if I just worked like 2 more years, we could have X more amount saved and put away on top of our number. And she gives me this look like, I don't know, like a chimp looking at a banana or something. Like, what are you thinking? And so she, again, just goes back to numbers and says, look, you're talking about 2 more years, and you're only going to put a little bit of more savings on top of the overall savings. The trade-off isn't worth it. Like, it doesn't pay out to just keep working just because of some fear that, oh my God, this plan won't work. And yeah, it was, maybe an hour or 2 discussion. And at the end of it, I'm like, 2019, barring some nuclear holocaust, yeah, I'm good to go.
That is so awesome. Jay, is there anything else that you just want to talk about generally?
The only other thing that I pretty much try to drive home is that there's so many people in the FI community, or that are new to it, that find, oh, well, it's easy for you guys to do this because you both made 6-figure salaries, or because you're an IT guy and you make 6-figure salary, or everybody that's doing this started off with a 6-figure salary. But the main reason that we did this and were able to do this was not because of our salary. It was because of the fact that we cut out all of this just frittering away discretionary spending, and we reeled in our lifestyle creep, and we said investing and having some money to invest is more important to us than eating out 2 or 3 times a week, and it's more important to us than going to Target and just buying stuff because we can once or twice a week. And those little decisions added up to having a lot of more income to invest so that we are able to get to this point easier. And I mean, for instance, Mrs. SSE able to take a teaching job where she took a 6-figure cut in her salary. But it's such a nice freedom for our family because our whole schedule has changed and opened up and become so much greater that I wouldn't, if we had to go back to how it was, it's not worth that 6 figures to add back into that equation. So you can do this. And you can get to this point without having a 6-figure salary. So don't be scared off by that.
Very cool. That's really powerful and insightful. And I think that it adds a depth and just a great perspective and a balance to really this framework that we're building. So you guys are doing some really cool stuff over there. And Jay, we're giving Miss SSC a lot of credit, but you're turning these ideas that she has into stories. You're moving them off the Excel sheet and really into people's lives. And I think there's some power there. So we're excited that we got a chance to do this with you. And now we're excited to introduce you to the hot seat. You ready for this, buddy?
Definitely. Let's do it.
Let's do it.
In a world drowning in debt and rampant consumption, trapped by the chains of lifestyle inflation, these questions highlight the secrets of those who have broken free. Welcome to the Choose FI Hot Seat.
We try to go big or go home, Jay. Were you ready for that?
Yes.
All right, Jay. So question number 1, your favorite blog that is not your own.
I'd have to say this would be a toss-up between 1500 Days and Our Next Life. Mainly because neither one really delves heavy into finance, and they do more storytelling or philosophical type questions or that sort of thing, as opposed to, say, like an Early Retirement Now, which I also love that one, but it's very number heavy, and that's where I go when I need a dose of finances or something along those lines. But yeah, I definitely like the Our Next Life because it's more philosophical, thought-provoking questions. Still related to FI, but...
It's funny is actually while we're recording this podcast, someone just sent us an email saying you really need to get Our Next Life on the podcast. So that's very, very timely.
Yeah, I would second that. So
nice. Sounds like a future guest for sure.
All right, question number 2, your favorite article. Now, we go back and forth. This can either be one of your own or it can be one somewhere else that really had an impact on you.
I'd have to say the one I mentioned earlier is definitely the one that has had the most impact on me, as that Paula Pant article. I don't know how to invest and I'm afraid of making expensive mistakes, because it's just laid out really well. And, when I read it, I was already past that point, but it struck me. I've just kept that link, and that's what I send out to other people that are just getting into investing. So that's definitely one of the favorites.
I actually want to take a second and plug Paula. Some people do something so unique and have their own style that's so unique that you just can't help but just stare at it. And I would say, Money Mustache has a very, very unique style of writing, but Paula Pant, her writing, I've never seen anything like it. Just as you're about to check out, she grabs you back, and she could have you in for a 5,000 word article. And she is an amazing writer. And yeah, absolutely. Almost anything she produces, I will take the time to just spend 5-10 minutes and read it, because it's going to be good.
Yes. And, it's funny because I'm not into real estate investing, don't want to get into it at all. So I hadn't really ever read much of her stuff. But that article, yeah, I keep it. I send it out. I refer people to it a lot. So.
All right, Jay, question number 3, your favorite life hack.
I have to say this would be a toss-up between roasting my own coffee or home brewing. I mean, they're both, I like the coffee one because, besides that it saves money because you can get 5 pounds at a time and you can change the roast and all that sort of thing. I mean, you can have it as fresh as you want pretty much any time, or possibly the home brewing. But I'd say from a life hack sort of thing, the roasting my own coffee, saving money that way, and getting really good quality coffee has got to be the best thing I've stumbled across so far.
Cool. All right, Jay, question number 4, your biggest financial mistake.
There's so many to choose from. I don't know where to start, but I would have to say probably the biggest financial mistake for me is cashing out a 401k just for no good reason. I just thought, I could use this money, and I calculated that no, I still came out ahead versus what I put in, even after the penalties and all of that. So in my mind, it was a win-win. And then again, many years later, Mrs. SSC points out, yes, but if you hadn't cashed it out, it would be worth about 60 grand or so by the time we could access it, which would be another year of fire. So good job, buddy. Way to mess up.
Yeah, I would say in the FI community, that might be one of the 7 deadly sins, unless you're doing it in the context of a Roth conversion.
Yeah, I didn't even really need it for anything. There wasn't a bill, there wasn't anything. I was just like, yeah, I'll take the money.
You know what? That's funny. That actually reminds me, one of my first jobs I had when I finished it, and I was probably only 18 years old and didn't have any idea of FI or FIRE or financial planning or anything. I cashed out one too. I think it was only $1,200 in it from this time at this job, but yeah, I cashed out one too. And that's funny. That was a long time ago.
All right, Jay, the advice you would give your younger self, and this has to be other than marrying Mrs. SSC, which I think is a slam dunk, right?
Yes. So besides that, I would say, I probably would say I would have to try and convince myself to not spend more than I earn, because remember all of that credit card debt I came into the marriage with. And yeah, quit treating student loans as like a life supplement infusion that comes around every semester, because again, it gets back to spending more than I earn. But I'd take max out student loans every year. Yeah, just use that as, oh, this will help cover if I want to go out at night or anything along those lines, not thinking, oh, I'm going to have to pay this back at some point. So yeah, I didn't do myself any favors. Let's just say that.
I'm right there with you, man. We are the same tragedy. That was a lost decade for both of us, but I'm glad to know that someone was able to get you back on track, and you guys are just crushing it now. So, thanks for sharing this little piece of your world with us. Thanks for taking the time to write it all down. And how can our community get in touch with you guys if they want to see and check out some of the work that you've been doing over the last year or two?
We have our blog over at slowlysippingcoffee.com, and all of our articles are there. You can contact us if you have any more specific questions with email.
Jay, we'll let you get out of the rain, and thanks so much for taking time out of your morning to do this with us.
Thanks for having me on. It's been really awesome, and I really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Slowly Sipping Coffee was a guest that we had by popular demand. And at the end of this episode, I hope you see why. And the great thing, anybody that wants to share their specific story, don't be afraid, oh, well, it's all been done. There's no room for me. Yes, there absolutely is room for you. If you have a story that you want to share, if you've made a single radical choice or you're considering making a radical choice, there is room for you in this space. And what I love about what they've created, one, I love everything about Miss SSC. She really is a game changer. Two, I love their framework that they built with the fully funded lifestyle choice. Like I said, we're getting all these emails from people asking us about the 3% versus the 4%. And the point is, you guys are saving 50% of your income. You're living for a fraction of the cost, and you're putting the difference towards buying your freedom. You're going to be okay. It's going to be okay. And hopefully that you enjoyed just getting yet another person's perspective on this. And it was an engaging perspective, and we were excited to be able to share it with you guys. So your questions, your feedback at choosefi.com. If you want to get on our email list, please go ahead and go to choosefi.com/subscribe. And the fire is spreading, my friend. So we'll see you next time as we continue to go down the road less traveled.
You've been listening to Choose FI Radio Podcast, where we help middle-class America build wealth, one life hack at a time.